A unified community is a safe, healthy, and prosperous one. For that, connecting local communities by our Central Florida Indian Community Networking Group. Good morning and welcome you all. Thank you all for joining today's Nutrition Talk. My name is Srini Jargula and I will be the moderator for today's program. Our lives have changed forever since COVID. We are all looking for healthy lifestyle, for better living, with the quality of life for ourselves and families. With that, we are doing this program in such an important year, 2023, International Millets Year for a Healthy Diet, and the important month of June, where it is International Day of Yoga month. So this month and this year, very important while we are doing this event. And today, our guest is nutritionist Leonila Campos. And she is a registered dietitian with 7 years of experience in many areas of nutrition. And Leonila is a consulting dietitian for Gradia Health. Leonila enjoys spending time with her family, and she has a passion supporting and helping her communities. Without taking much time, I'm handing over to our guest. Before that, we are going to start question answer session at the end of the presentation. And before that, I wanted to thank on behalf of our group for today's talk sponsor, Digestive and Liver Center of Florida and Gradia Health. Thank you. Now I'm handing over to Leonila.
Thank you so much for the introduction, and I'm happy to be here. Can you hear me okay? Yes, wonderful. So I am a registered dietitian. There we go. And as Srini mentioned, I do have experience in many areas of nutrition. I started my career as a women, infant, and children dietitian. So with pregnant women and children from the age of 0 to 5. And then I did anything in between skilled nursing, nutrition, and chronic disease management, such as diabetes, chronic kidney disease, and dialysis. I also have experience in vegan and vegetarian nutrition. And yes, I'm part of Gradia, the Gradia team. I am in California, so there's 3 hour difference. One of the reasons why I became a dietitian, it's because my grandmother has diabetes too. So this was back in high school. So she would go to the doctor and they would tell her, well, you just don't eat your rice or beans or tortillas. And she would come home really frustrated, right? Like, what do you mean I can't eat those foods that identify me, the foods that I eat on a daily basis? So I thought to myself, there has to be a way to be able to teach our community to have healthy meals, but still be able to enjoy the foods that are part of the culture. And so I looked into programs. And so I was able to thankfully find a nutrition program close to home. And that's where I did my bachelor's degree in science or food science and nutrition, and then my internship to become a dietitian. Let's see. So let's talk about diabetes. For someone that gets diagnosed with diabetes, sometimes the diagnosis is really confusing, right? We know people that have diabetes. Maybe we had a family member, but really knowing what it is, right, and how that affects our bodies is very individualized. Diabetes doesn't really give you a symptom right away, right? It usually is, it's a chronic condition. So you will have diabetes for maybe a period of time, unless if you are diagnosed with prediabetes, right? And you know that, hey, I have high blood sugars, not to the level where I'm diabetic. But it doesn't get to the point until you have a hemoglobin A1C of 11 or 13 or 14, where your body's telling you, hey, there's so much blood sugar in the blood that we are so thirsty, we are urinating often, we're hungry all the time. And so then, you go to the doctor and then you can get a diagnosis. But otherwise, we might not know. And many people don't know that they have diabetes. But what diabetes is, right? It is a chronic progressive metabolic disease that affects how our body turns sugar and carbohydrates into energy. So every part of our bodies need the sugar that we get from food, right? That's the energy. That's what helps us move. That's the brain. The brain is one of the organs that needs carbohydrates directly. That's how it functions. And so when we have high levels of blood sugar, that just means that the blood sugar is staying in the blood. And for some reason, the cells are not getting that energy or that sugar into that cell. And so we essentially are starving the cell, right? So starving our bodies. So that's why we get so hungry all the time. But again, so think of when you have high levels of blood sugar, think of the blood as being like syrup, right? It's really, really thick. And so it's really hard for your heart to try to pump that type of blood throughout your body. And so other parts of your body start to get affected, right? Your eyes, your kidneys, your legs. Think of, when you don't have good circulation. And so that's one of the really, really important factors to when someone has diabetes. Check your feet every day, right? You might not have feelings on your feet anymore. So, but that doesn't mean that you might not get an infection, right? So always check your feet. Let's see. So it's a disease that promotes inflammation. So diabetes is a type of condition that promotes inflammation, right? So our bodies are in inflammation often. And so what that does is that creates a lot of stress in the body. And so that affects also our gut, right, or our stomach and our intestines. So this picture here shows you, right, how our food it's turned, it digests into sugar. So pretty much everything that we eat, right, with the exception of water, some proteins and fat, everything that we eat has to turn into sugar, right? Again, that's how the body likes those nutrients. And then when there is sugar in the blood, pancreas is triggered to release insulin, which is the hormone that helps our body take the sugar and take it into the cell. Okay, so let's see here. So some of the diabetes related diseases, meaning that when we don't have control of our diabetes or our blood sugars, these other conditions can also arise, right? So cardiovascular disease. So again, think of your heart, how hard it is working to try to pump that blood. Maybe if it's really high levels of blood sugar, think of that syrupy image, right? Your heart is trying so hard to pump all that blood through your body, but on that process is working really hard. And so then we start to have heart disease, along other factors too that we will mention as well. So neuropathy and pain. So that's just, again, because the blood has to flow throughout your body. Sometimes there is a delay there because of the high levels of blood sugar. So you start to have pain throughout your body, right, on your extremities, on your legs, and that's called neuropathy. Kidney disease, excuse me. So diabetes, uncontrolled diabetes, and uncontrolled high blood pressure are the two main conditions that affect the kidneys. And so usually doctors will check your kidneys, right, when you have your physicals or when you have your 3-month visits, because diabetes is directly correlated to chronic kidney disease. And so if we don't control our diabetes, right, that can lead to dialysis. And so hemodialysis or other types of dialysis. It affects our eyes, right, because there's tiny, tiny vessels in our eyes. And so again, think of the therapy blood, right? So there's not enough oxygen going to those tiny vessels. And so those tiny vessels start to die. And so then we get eye disease. Impaired wound healing for the same reason, right? So there's not enough blood circulating to that wound. And so there's not enough nutrition to be able to heal that wound. So then we are healing less. There's skin and mouth infections as well, hearing impairment, Alzheimer's disease has been linked to that as well, depression. And I want to stop here for a little bit and talk about the mental health when it comes to a diabetes diagnosis. A lot of the times that is not talked, right, especially in our minority groups, in our minority communities, because we usually don't learn about mental health, right? Or like how we feel about getting a diagnosis like diabetes. We usually, focus on bringing down the blood sugars and the eating and the exercise. We don't really talk about the mental health. And so it is really important that if you're having, emotions, that you're having strong feelings about your diagnosis, that you have to know that it is okay to talk to your doctor about getting a referral for a mental health professional. It doesn't mean that you're crazy, right? Sometimes we think about talking to a therapist or a psychologist if we have problems, right? Or if we are crazy, but that is not the case, right? Sometimes we just don't know how to manage our emotions, how to manage maybe that anger that we have, or the why, right? Like, why did I get diabetes? And so depression affects every part of our bodies too, right? How we do things on a daily basis. And so it is okay to ask, feel okay, give yourself permission to say, hey, I do need help, and it's okay for me to ask my doctor for a referral to a health professional. Sometimes there is unintended weight gain or weight loss. I have seen some trends when there's high levels of diabetes or high levels of blood sugar, when someone starts to lose weight significantly, or the other way, like gain weight. And it could be how the body responds to those high levels of blood sugar. So if it's the weight loss, right, it could be because maybe we're just not getting that nutrition into the cells. And so we're hungry all the time. But even if we eat, all our meal, we still can have the weight loss. Let's see, okay. So here's a chart of how, when we eat, how that affects our blood sugars, right? So if we don't eat, right, our blood sugars usually are pretty stable, right? Our bodies are able to allow that, because when we eat, our body is so efficient and so amazing that it stores sugar, right? Stores energy in our muscles and our other organs, and so in our liver. And so when our blood sugar starts to drop, then your body triggers, the liver to release a little bit of sugar into the blood to get you going. But then when we eat food, then that also, right, that increases your blood sugars. So here's a chart of how, so the green line, right, this line right here shows you that how a balanced meal, which I'll go over and what that means. It goes up, right, when you eat something, and then it starts to go down naturally, right? Because your pancreas is doing its job, is saying, hey, we have sugar in the blood, let's send some insulin so we can get that sugar out of the blood and into the cells. So that's usually where, what we want our bodies to do. When we have a meal that is really, really high in sugar, right? Either because we're eating a lot of flours or eating mostly desserts or candy or something like that, our blood sugar, or juice, anything that is really, really sweet, right? As soon as you consume it, those blood sugar levels are going to go really, really high. But because our bodies are so sensitive to it, right, that is going to tell your pancreas, hey, let's send that insulin, because we can have those high levels of blood sugar. And so then you have a drop, right, in blood sugar. And so sometimes that triggers you to be hungry again. And so then you eat some more. So you can see that it's a roller coaster, right? But essentially what we want to do is we want to be able to have balanced meals, to have a more stable line where we have a little bit of a spike, then our body does, or the medication does the job and then brings them down. And then when it's time to eat another meal, right, we eat it, and then the same thing happens again. Essentially, that's what we want to do. Let's see. So what are some of the lifestyle behaviors that promotes diabetes management? So how can we manage diabetes, right, nutritionally? So we have macronutrients, right, which are just the main nutrients of food. So we have proteins, carbohydrates, and fat. So your proteins are, your meats, if you consume meat, fish, chicken, beef, tofu, it's another source of protein, eggs, egg whites. And then if we don't eat animal proteins, right, so most of your protein is going to come from plant sources. So beans, legumes, garbanzo beans, tofu, edamame, any type of other soy products, that will be part of your protein. But we have to remember that some of those protein sources also have carbohydrates in them, right? Mostly fiber, but they also count as a carbohydrate. And then you have your carbohydrates, anything, so your fruits, your dairy, your yogurt, your milk, which is part of dairy, your starchy vegetables such as potatoes, peas, corn, your winter squashes like pumpkin. Those are part of your carbohydrates, tortillas, bread, cereal, oatmeal. And then you have your fats, right? Oils, your nuts, your seeds, your avocados, which is a fruit, but yeah, it's mostly a healthy fat. And so it is important to consume your meals at a consistent time, right? So for example, let's say you eat a meal at 8 in the morning and then you don't eat again until 5, right? Your body naturally is going to have those little spikes of sugar because that's such a long period of time without eating. And so depending on how you train your body too, right? Our bodies, again, are amazing and they're able to adapt to essentially what we tell them to do. And so if you got your body used to not eating for a long period of time, they're able to do that. But what we have to remember is that, let's say we have a meal at 8 and then another meal is not going to be until 5. And that meal is, a huge plate of food. That is going to affect your blood sugars, right? Because there's so much food at one time that your body has to work extra hard to be able to digest that food. And so, yes, your blood sugars can definitely increase. And so sometimes having smaller meals throughout the day might be more beneficial for your blood sugar control. Let's see, in the sense of like, if we follow a vegetarian or a vegan or a plant-forward eating style, right, our focus is going to be on the vegetables, on the proteins, your legumes, your beans, your what else? Your garbanzo beans, your lentils, and then balancing out with some fruits, nuts, and seeds. And then I don't have to say the herbs and spices because our foods, right, are really flavorful, and that's okay. So your herbs and spices are not going to affect your blood sugars to a significant level, right? But they will add flavoring to your food. Now, if you have other conditions like acid reflux, right? Sometimes we do have to be a little mindful of the spicy food if we know that causes more acid reflux. It is important to also mention the probiotics. So probiotics are the healthy bacteria in our gut, right? When there is diabetes or any other chronic health condition that increases inflammation, it affects your gut bacteria. And so the gut bacteria, again, is the healthy bacteria in our digestive system. And we have trillions, we have so many bacteria. And that kind of balances our immunity. It also reduces inflammation. And so sometimes medications or just being sick can really affect the good bacteria in our gut. And so we have to replenish it, right? We can replenish it through food, such as fermented foods, kimchi, we have kimchi or anything, kefir, kombucha. Those are some fermented foods, tempeh. And then the prebiotics are the food that feeds the probiotics, right? So any kind of fiber is going to help build your bacteria. If you take a supplement, right, which is why you want to talk to your doctor first about supplements, you just have to make sure that you take, every time you finish a supplement, you try to get a different kind that has different type of strains, right? You don't want to just build one type of strain or, several type of strains of bacteria, for years on, because you want to be able to have a diversity of good bacteria, right? If you are taking a supplement. Other things that, we also have to consider is your micronutrients. So the smaller nutrients, right, that we get. And usually you get them, most of them in food if you have a variety of foods, right? If we only eat one type of vegetable or one color of vegetable, we only get the nutrients from that color, right? We're not getting like the oranges, or we're not getting the yellows, or we're not getting the purples. So adding a variety of foods with different colors is more beneficial because you're getting lots of nutrients that way. Now, you might say, okay, how about if I just take a multivitamin with minerals, right? And yes, you can absolutely do that. Again, talk to your doctor about which one is the best one for you. But keep in mind that a multivitamin with mineral supplement is not going to give you the phytochemicals, which is, those nutrients that you can get from fruits and vegetables, whole grains, nuts, and seeds that protect your cells, right? Again, and remember that your cells are already compromised because of the diabetes. So getting those nutrients from food would be the first step, right? And then if you want to supplement, as the name of supplements indicate, then you can add one according to your doctor. And then adequate hydration. So we want to aim for at least 64 ounces of water a day. If you can have a little more, that's even better. Again, think of how hard your body is working, especially your kidneys, right? To be able to keep you going. If you take lots of medications, that goes through your liver, then goes to your kidneys. And so you have to be able to stay hydrated to help your body do its job and to last longer, right? But also, the more hydrated you are, right? So at least 64 ounces of water, that helps you just in general, right? Sometimes we feel hungry, and it might not be that we're hungry. It's probably that we're thirsty, right? Maybe we haven't had enough water throughout the day. And so we might associate that hunger or that feeling of hunger, and it's actually thirst, right? And so you don't want to feel thirsty, because usually that's an indication that we're slightly dehydrated already. So if you just get in the habit of drinking water throughout the day, right, that will help just overall in general. Let's see, other things that also promote diabetes management is movement, right? Exercise, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. Managing stress, right? So think about stress as another way to increase inflammation. So stress, when you have something stressful, right, and you're like on the edge of your seat, that's your body's response of a fight or flight response, right? So either you are going to fight somebody, or you're going to run away because there's something dangerous. Nowadays, our stress is not that way, right? It's just a stress that we have on a constant basis. So your body's always trying to fight something or run away. But that increases inflammation, right? That makes you tired because you're like, I can't seem to rest. And so now on top of that, we add the uncontrolled diabetes and then maybe other uncontrolled health conditions. So your body is just working 24/7 without rest, right? And so being able to manage stress can really help your body, excuse me, to reduce inflammation and just to feel well overall. Some techniques to manage stress is meditating or reading or journaling or talking to somebody, walking, anything that you feel like you're at peace, right? Praying, so things like that. The other factor that helps too is sleep, right? We want to be able to 10 hours. Oh, that would be amazing. I'm sure. I don't know anybody that can sleep, except for a teen or a young person. But 7 to 8 hours would be ideal, right, for sleep. Because think of sleep as the time that your body has to rest and recover, right? The hormones work at night and they are able to help you recover and repair. But if we don't get enough sleep, essentially we're not allowing our bodies to do that, right? So then we wake up tired, and then that increases our stress. And then when there's one thing that I forgot to mention about stress is that also sometimes leads to want to eat something, right? Because we are in a high level of stress, your body is like, okay, we have to be ready all the time. We want to be able to have energy available, which means that we're hungry, right? We want to eat something. Same thing with the lack of sleep, because when we don't sleep enough, we think that we are hungry, but it might just be that we're so tired. And so our bodies are like, okay, we need to stay awake. One of the ways to stay awake is to eat something, right? To be able to have energy. But if we just fix the underlying problem, which is the lack of sleep, right? We will be able to feel better and not have those cravings or want to eat something all the time. Same thing with stress. Unmanaged stress can also lead to, it could go other way, right? Not eating or eating a little bit more because of that. Positive social connections and having that support, right? It is important, like this group, right? It is important to have a support group or a community where you can go and say, hey, I'm having these problems, or just to talk and relax, right? That really helps. We are social human beings. And so as Serini mentioned, when COVID happened, lots of, I'm sure, things happened at that time. And we were so isolated that we couldn't really reach out to any, we could call somebody, but it's not the same as having a, personal one-on-one conversation or a group conversation. And so being able to feel comfortable and reaching out to someone they will help you is also one of the ways to manage your diabetes. Sunlight exposure, because of the vitamin D, right? Most people are vitamin D deficient. And so that helps with our vitamin D helps with immunity, just helps with healing, it helps with just overall health. So you live in Florida, which is, it's a sunshine state. So, having some sunlight exposure can really help. Of course, using your sunscreen just to be healthy there. And then balancing your gut microbiome. So as I mentioned, with the probiotics and the prebiotics, right? Adding a variety of those foods, adding a supplement if your doctor, recommends. That's another option too. So I wanted to talk about specifically about the foods that are more, that more of, right? Just so that way we have a better understanding on how sugars can affect you. Sometimes that having that example can really, it helps make better understanding of how the food that we eat affects our diabetes. So these are some of the most common sweets in a chart of the nutrition information for it. So this one is it a barfi? How you say it?
So especially for Indians, huh?
Yes, specifically for Indian sweets. Yes. So 5 pieces of this sweet,
barfi.
Right? Barfi. Thank you. It has 285 calories, 12 grams of fat, and 39 grams of carbohydrate. So to give you an idea of, and I'll go over that in a little bit, but a meal, right? A balanced meal, meaning that we have 3 food groups, mostly, right? So we want to have a protein. What protein does when you add it to your meals, it stabilizes your blood sugars, right? And your hunger. So you're not going to be hungry as fast. So any kind of protein. And then we want to have 2 fistfuls of vegetables, any kind of vegetable that you like, right? It doesn't have to be broccoli if you hate broccoli, right? There's so many vegetables out there. Choose whichever ones you want. Again, remember, the more variety that you add, the more nutrients that you get. And then you want to choose your carbohydrates, right? Even if that is bread, if that is tortilla, if that is chapati, if that is roti, if that is rice, right? That is part of your carbohydrate. So about half a cup to 3/4 cups would be the serving for that specific meal. Now, that's equivalent to about 30 to 45 grams of carbohydrates. So if I eat this sweet, right, 5 pieces, then I'm almost getting what I need of carbohydrate for that entire meal, plus maybe other carbohydrates that I want to eat, like rice or tortilla, what else? Or another sweet maybe. So essentially, we could be having like an 80-gram carbohydrate meal, right? Which is a lot of sugar for the blood to handle just in just that one sitting. So how can we manage that, right? To still be able to enjoy it, but without maybe consuming too much of it. So I don't want you to feel like, okay, this dietitian is telling me not to eat my sweets, right? But or my tortilla or my rice. No, that's not the case, because otherwise, you're gonna do it anyway. But what we want to do here is we want to be able to balance it out and say, okay, so instead of having 5 pieces, how about if I only have 1 or 2? So that way I can only have, I don't know, 12 grams of carbohydrates for that specific food. And then I can add the rest with my rice or my tortillas or my roti or other type of carbohydrate. And then I will feel satisfied, right? I have to tell you that behavior change takes a lot of work, right? It's not going to just happen, from day to day, today, and then tomorrow you're like perfect. I have changed my behaviors. So it requires constant working and being able to balance things out, right? And so if you have, like I mentioned, a support that can help you and say, hey, how are you doing? Are you needing any help? Or coming together as, okay, how are we going to make our meals balanced? That's what's going to help long term. Okay, so second one, jalebi, right? 2 pieces, it's 500 calories. Now keep in mind that usually a meal, right, is about 350 to 500 calories, right? A meal in one sitting. So if I have 2 of these ones, that's essentially having a whole meal, right? 18 grams of fat and 80 carbohydrates. That's pretty much the carbohydrates that I need for 2 meals, right? So it is a high amount. So even if I cut it to 1 piece, right, that's 250 calories, 9 grams of fat, 40 grams of carbohydrates. It's almost
So
like
if
saying,
we,
okay, I'll just eat.
sorry to interrupt. If we eat 1 jalebi, almost we are taking half of the meal.
Correct. Yes. Plus, if I want to have rice or if I want to have other components that are also carbohydrate, that can add up, right? So sometimes, if we have a meal that is, heavily in carbohydrates and you check your blood sugars 2 hours later, most likely they are going to be really high, right? Maybe 300s, maybe 400s, I'm not sure. If we use insulin, then absolutely you can learn to count carbohydrates and inject yourself the amount of units that you need for that amount of carbohydrates. But that doesn't take into account the calories or the fat, right? And so if you're noticing, oh my gosh, I'm gaining weight, every week I'm gaining weight. So then we have to look at the meals that we're consuming. If they say, because maybe I'm consuming jalebi every single day, right? So if that is the case, 500 calories a week, that is 1 pound of body fat that you will gain in a week, right? So in a month, you'll gain 30 pounds, right? And so just changing that a little bit, that can help. Now, if you make these desserts at home, then there are ways that you're able to make them healthier, right? So if we deep fry them, okay, how about if we learn how to bake them or how to air fry them? They might not taste as delicious, right? Because this is what happens when we use fat, oil, or fat, flour, and sugar. It creates this coating in our tongue that is so delicious that sometimes it's hard for us to stop eating them, right? Because they're so good. And it's because of that combination of ingredients, right? And so it will be a matter to getting used to the new flavors and allowing your body to do that. It takes about 14, 15 days for your taste buds to change. So if you do something consistently for 15 days, you will know a difference at the end. You will say, oh yeah, this is really sweet, or this is really salty, because you have allowed your body to change, right? Your taste buds to change for that time. Okay, so here are some more other examples, right? Is the suji?
Yeah.
Half a
Suji
bowl.
halwa, yeah.
Halwa. Half a bowl is 260 calories, 12.9 grams of fat, 24.3 grams of carbohydrates. So this one is less, right? A little less. So half a bowl. But if we eat an entire bowl, right? So that's almost 50 grams of carbohydrates and 430 something calories. Let's see. Gulab jamun, 2 pieces, right? 54.6 grams of carbohydrates, almost what we need for the entire meal. Padi, 2 pieces is 404 or 504, 23 grams of of fat. So it is higher in fat, right? 67 grams of carbohydrates. And then there is laddu.
So, yeah, laddu.
Yeah, so 29.6. So 30 grams, right, of carbohydrates. So close to what we would need for that one meal as well. But 362 calories. It is pretty high in fat, right? 26.6. So in general, right, we need maybe 50 to 70 grams of fat a day, depending on the amount of calories that we're consuming. So if it's 26, that's, half of what we would need for the entire day. And then fat, you might wonder, like, why is fat, like, how is fat going to affect my blood sugars? And it's not. Fat is not going to affect your blood sugars, but it is going to affect your weight, and it is going to affect your heart health. Your triglycerides and your good cholesterol, your bad cholesterol are going to be affected. And then ragula, 38 grams, and Kalakan, 33.96 or 34. So that's some extent. I'm sure there's a lot more other sweets, right?
Yeah,
and one of the ways, right?
So, but these are the common one. Generally,
right.
Where we take the jalebi is going to have more carbohydrates, and laddu is going to be more fat.
Right.
So
yes,
the saturated fat we need for male, it is 30 grams per day, and for women we need only 20 grams of saturated fat per day.
Thank you. Yes. And so another thing that you have to consider, right? If you wanted to, like, when you go to the grocery store and you look at a nutrition facts label, if you get it from the counter, right, it's harder to say, okay, I don't even know how much grams of carbohydrates in here. But if it's really sweet, for sure it's going to be high in carbohydrates, right? Because it's mostly going to be sugar, a combination of flour, and if it's fried, then it's going to be higher amounts of fat.
So what is Leonila, what is the alternative for the sugar, actually, a healthy alternative for the sugar, especially when you make a dessert or use in a coffee or something?
Great question. So Splenda is one of them that has a specific one for baking, but stevia is another one you can use in your coffee or your drinks. There is monk fruit. What are the other ones?
And there are recently the study shows that the palm jaggery, it's a kind of alternative sugar. For that one, that is helping a lot. Palm jaggery, one of that
Jaggery,
one, or regular honey.
Honey, perfect. Yep, that's enough. And then you get some nutrients from honey as well.
Yes.
There's
okay, please continue.
Options there. Here's just a visual of that. Very different foods. I don't think you need a visual since it was mostly for me.
Can I ask you one question about the alternative sugar for alternative?
Yes, of course.
How about agave? Is it good, or what do you think?
Yes, agave it's fine as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Let's see. Okay. So I wanted to just show a picture of sometimes when we think about a vegetarian or vegan meal or plant forward, right? That's another word that's like so common now. We think of like, oh, that person only eats like, peanut butter and jelly sandwich or chips or something that is, or rice, like only rice and beans. But not necessarily, right? We can make a vegetarian or vegan or a plant-based meal more colorful and more wholesome and more balanced, right? So for example, in here we have a bowl that has sweet potatoes and onions and greens and mushrooms, chickpeas and tofu, right, for your protein, with some dressing. And that is a pretty wholesome meal, right? You have your carbohydrates from your chickpeas and your sweet potato. You have your greens from the greens and the onion, and then you have your protein from the tofu and the chickpeas, and then a little bit of fat with the dressing. So that is a balanced meal, right? It doesn't have to be like just one or two groups. But let me show you here. I want to say that I think I have more examples and a few more slides. But to continue with the behaviors that promote diabetes management, right? We talked about that one. I went back, I think. Let's see this one. Yes. But how about the behaviors that promote poor gut bacteria health, right? It's overall our nutrition, right? So if we're eating a lot of more processed foods, more foods that are high in saturated fats or trans fats, foods that are high in sugar, those foods are not helping our good bacteria, right, to grow and to continue to develop. And so that can also affect our inflammation, our stress, how our bodies manage disease. And so again, being able to add those foods throughout, on a daily basis if possible, that can help our good bacteria. Dehydration, not drinking enough fluids, right? So pretty much opposite of what creates or promotes good gut bacteria.
So, and also the yogurt and buttermilk also helps every day if you take to give the good bacteria.
Yes, thank you. I forgot.
Yeah.
I forgot about yogurt and yeah. Absolutely. Let's see. Yeah, and the opposite of that too, right? So not having movement. So think of movement, just allowing your body to be able to get the blood flow going, right? If we're just sitting all the time or laying down all the time, then it's harder for your heart, right, to be able to pump that blood. So that we have multiple factors that affects your heart, right? One, if we have high levels of blood sugar, and then the movement, right? So we're not helping our bodies to get that blood flowing. High levels of stress, inadequate sleep, not having that good support, right? So if you're feeling, again, having those strong feelings of like loneliness or sadness, that lasts long, right? We are human. There's days where you're gonna feel lonely or we're gonna feel sad. But if those days last long, right, it's okay to ask for help. No having adequate sunlight or being exposed to different types of environmental chemicals that can also affect your health. Let's see, and then unintended weight gain, right? So usually the more weight we gain in terms of body fat, that can also affect our overall health, right? For sure will affect your heart, but your liver, your kidneys, your pancreas. Let's see. Okay, so let's talk about the making your meals balanced, right? So I mentioned, so we have to prioritize protein and vegetables because the combination of the protein and the vegetables, so the fiber, right? You get lots of fiber and protein in vegetables and your fruits, nuts, and seeds and whole grains. And the protein, that will help you to feel satisfied, right? And you will get that increase in blood sugars, but it's not going to be a significant increase. And so you're going to allow your body and the medication to bring those blood sugar levels down without having that spike. And then your body has to work really hard to bring them down. And then you add the carbohydrates that you like, right? if it's going to be rice, or if it's going to be a tortilla, or if it's going to be a small amount of sweets, right? You want to have it with that meal. And then you can supplement it with fruits too. So we don't, sometimes I hear, my patients that have diabetes, oh, I cannot eat fruit because it has sugar. But we forget that fruit has other nutrients, right? It gives you those antioxidants that protect your cells. It gives you those phytochemicals. It gives you fiber. So if you're gonna tell me, okay, should I drink the juice or should I eat the fruit? I'd rather you eat the fruit, right? Because of the fiber in it. And it's not going to increase your blood sugar significantly versus drinking the juice, because we are missing the fiber, right? That is going to increase your blood sugar as you're drinking that juice. Not to say that you cannot have it, right? But it's just going to be a smaller amount, and hopefully you drink it with your meal, so that protein and the fiber and the fat from that meal helps those blood sugars to not spike. We want to aim for at least 25 grams of fiber a day. And the way that you do that is by making sure that we're having, those 2 cups of vegetables with each meal. If we're not able to do that with breakfast, that's okay. At least with lunch and dinner, right? 2 cups of vegetables. However you want to make them. And let me take that back. So not using so much oil, right? Or so much butter, but being able to add them to your meals. And then like your 3/4 cup of grains, right? Or if you want to have a tortilla or a rice, and then you can have some healthy fats, nuts, seeds, avocado, to complement that meal. They will give you some fiber too. Okay, so I have some examples here. So this is what we call the My Plate, right? It used to be My Pyramid, now it's My Plate. It's essentially what I'm saying, right? We want to be able to have half of our plate veggies, 1/4 grains, and 1/4 protein. And then you can supplement with yogurt, right, to get your probiotics, or other type of dairy that you like, or a plant-based milk. But it just gives you here, some guidelines, some general guidelines, right? So right here, it gives you more specific guidelines, right? For many women and older adults, about 1,600 calories. It's going to be less. It's going to be based on what your goals are, right? So if your goal is to lose weight, okay, so it might be a little less, right? Or if your goal is to gain weight, so it might be a little bit more. If you're a very active person, right, then you might have to adjust it too. But it gives you just a general idea of what that is, this in terms of servings, and then what is considered a serving here. Right, for example, half a bagel is 1 serving of a grain. I'm sorry, 1/4 of a bagel. Bagels are very, very dense, right? And anything that is a bread that is really dense is going to be, you're going to get a smaller amount for a higher amount of carbohydrates. We want to choose more whole grains, right, because of the fiber. And then your vegetables, as I mentioned, the more variety you get, the better, right? Your reds, your whites, your oranges, your greens, your yellows. So if it's a challenge right now, right, to get a variety of veggies, you can propose yourself a goal of, okay, every week I will try a new color of vegetable, and then I'll add it to the meals that I enjoy. Sometimes pairing a new food with something that you already eat is usually more acceptable, because you're not just eating that one new food and we're resistant to it, right? Here are some example of your fruits. Again, the same thing, you want to add a variety of fruits, right? There's so many out there. Your yellows, your blues, your reds, your purples, your greens. And then your dairy or dairy equivalents. If you, excuse me, if you don't drink.
I think we are not able to see the other slides, if you can put it.
Oh, yeah. Oh my goodness.
Okay.
Thank you. You're like, I don't know what she's talking about.
No, the slides are not there yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
And these, are you able to see this one okay?
Yeah, My Plate I can see right now.
Okay, perfect.
Yep. Thank you.
You're welcome. So this is just an example of that. One of the things about dairy, right? And it doesn't have to be dairy. It could be maybe a fortified plant-based milk to get the calcium that you need, right? And so it is important to get that calcium with the vitamin D to have strong bones and prevent injuries or prevent osteoporosis and all that. Although, if you are needing a supplement, absolutely talk to your doctor about the supplementation. Let's see. And then we have our proteins, right? All types of beans, fava beans, kidney, hatsuki, pinto beans, soys, your peas that are going to be also have a good amount of protein. Meat alternatives like grains with legumes, soy meat, tofu, edamame, nuts and seeds. And then for your healthy fats, right? That's like, again, your avocado, your flaxseed, your nuts, nut butters, oils, and then sometimes your sweets. Okay, so let me go back to
Process.
I think you might be muted.
Srini, you're on mute.
How about processed food?
Yes, so processed foods are going to have a combination of the saturated fats, the trans fats. So it is important to limit. Oh, sorry. I don't know if we can. Let me go back here.
Yeah, we don't see the slide. Yeah.
Okay. The processed meat or processed foods are going to have a higher amount of fats, saturated fats, trans fats. So trans fats are you definitely want to eliminate or avoid trans fats. You won't see that on the nutrition facts label because the USDA said to the food industry, you have to add the minimal amount of trans fats or avoid them. And so you won't see it on the nutrition facts label, but you will see it on the ingredients list, right? If something has partially hydrogenated oils or hydrogenated oils, that is a trans fat. Now, it might not be, so anything that has 0.5 grams or less of hydrogenated oils, it doesn't have to be added on the nutrition facts label, but it doesn't mean that it has 0, right? And so if we eat more than 2 servings, then yes, you will get the trans fats. And the trans fats are the ones that are really affecting the heart, right? So it can lead to heart disease.
It triggers the bad cholesterol, right?
Right. Yes, and your triglycerides as well.
Yeah.
But the other thing too, right, that some processed foods might have high fructose corn syrup or any type of corn syrup, and that has been linked directly to fatty liver disease, right? And so we definitely want to avoid them too.
And also deep fried items, in any oil, if we do the deep fried items, then how it is going to affect?
Right, so your deep fried items are going to have more of your saturated fat, right?
Yeah.
And which is going to increase your bad cholesterol, and it's going to affect your usually higher in calories too, so it's going to affect your weight as well. So we want to try to limit them as much as we can, or find a healthier alternative, right, of something similar to that. Very good. Let's see. And one of the other things that we mentioned is movement.
And also one more doubt is because we tend to use a lot of salt for the taste, how it is directly affecting the the body, the salt.
Right. Yes, thank you. So So the recommendation for someone that doesn't have high blood pressure for salt, right, is 2,500 milligrams. You can go up to 3,000 milligrams of sodium, and that is equivalent to about 1 teaspoon of salt, right, a day. But for someone that has high blood pressure, you want to limit to less than 1,500 milligrams a day, right? So when you look at the nutrition facts label and something has 500 milligrams, that is a third of what you need for the entire day. Now, high amounts of salt has been linked to high blood pressure. So if you already have high blood pressure and you eat salty foods, that is affecting your blood pressure, which is affecting your heart, which is going to affect your kidneys, right? So it's a correlation with everything. So the best way to reduce the salt, right, is decrease it slowly. Definitely don't use those concentrated amounts of salt. There's some cubes, but there's some powders too that they have so much salt in them. So you can use just the natural flavors of the food, herbs, spices. As long as you don't have acid reflux that can affect that. But those are some of the ways to still enjoy the flavor of the food without adding a high amount of salt that is affecting your blood pressure as well.
How about the spicy foods? More, if we eat the more spicy, how it affects?
Yeah, so spicy food, if you already have issues with GERD, right? So if you have acid reflux, that can trigger your GERD, but it can also affect your esophagus or your stomach, right? It might cause a little bit of inflammation as well. And so I know spicy food identifies also our cultures, right? And so, but if you're getting symptoms of having, a lot of spicy food, reducing the amount can also help.
Okay, thank you.
See, you're welcome. So movement, walking, but you don't have to go to the gym if you don't like going to the gym, but walking is free, right? And it's so underrated. And walking after a meal has been shown to decrease blood sugars, right? Because you're getting that blood flowing, you're using that energy to power your legs, right? So walking after a meal can be super helpful to manage your blood sugars, but not only at that time, right? You can do it at any time during the day that best suits you. Aiming for at least 30 minutes of any kind of movement most days would be helpful. If you can walk every single day, that is awesome. But if you cannot, let's say if you don't walk and you want to start, definitely start slow, right? 10 minutes, 3 times a week, and then increase it that way. So set a goal for yourself that is sustainable, right? And that's doable. So ask yourself, how likely am I to do this goal on a scale from 0 to 10? 0 is no, I'm not going to do it. 10 is I'm 100%. If you are at 8 or higher, that means that is a sustainable goal. If it's at a lower number, okay, how can I modify this goal to be able to do it better? So if it's 10 minutes is too much, okay, I'll start with 5 minutes, right? It might seem silly, and you're like, anybody can do that. Exactly, right? It's so simple that it's doable for you, and then you can increase it slowly. If you're not able to walk, but you're able to move your arms, right? You can use your arms. You can sit down and use your legs. Swimming is a whole body movement, so if you're able to swim, right, that's another option. There's different ways that we're able to move our bodies that might not cause pain if you have pain. If you're able to incorporate strength training, right, like weightlifting or using bands, that also helps with your bones and just overall mobility and flexibility, which as we age, we lose. And so if we do it at least 2 times a week, that can go a long way. Let's see, okay. Just a little bit of supplement. This is a really busy slide, but it just talks about one of the supplements that can help with glucose, right? But it shouldn't be taken with other medications that lower blood sugars. So if you take metformin or any other medication, right? With supplements, it's more, you have to be really cautious. So always talk to your doctor about any kind of herb that you want to take or any kind of natural supplement that you want to take, because it can interact with other medications. But usually, berberine is one of those supplements that is, so spoken in common right now. So I wanted to add it there. There's some medications that say, oh, it's for diabetes or it lowers your blood sugars. There is a rating by a health organization, the National Medicine, and the higher the rating, usually the what is the word that I'm trying to say here? The better it is per se. And so, like for example, this medication, right, it has a rating of 5, so it's not very good. And I do hear that a lot, right? Like these medications or this supplement is going to help you with diabetes, but it hasn't been enough research to say that it is, right? Dietary supplements are not, they're not FDA approved, right? And so they can be tested by a third party, but you always have to talk to your doctor first if you want to add something like that, because it could affect your liver, right? Or it could interact with other medications. Let's see. Yes. So if you're wanting to reduce inflammation, right, you can add herbs and spices that can help with that, like cinnamon, turmeric, your omega-3 fatty acids. If you don't eat fish, right, you can get them from flaxseed or chia seeds or tempeh. Those are some ways to get your omegas. And then if adding more fortified foods, like fortified drinks, tofu, soy milk, which are fortified with vitamin D, can also supplement your vitamin D levels. Magnesium, chromium, which can be affected by diabetes, right? The more, again, variety of foods that you get, usually we won't get a deficiency. It's sometimes more of when we take medications that maybe affect a specific nutrient or mineral, or if we're not eating a balanced meal, right? It's usually when we see a deficiency. But if you're eating a variety of foods, the risk is less of a deficiency. Let's see. Here are some environment disruptors, meaning that they might affect our health. So BPAs, most of bottles, right, say that they are BPA free, but they have been shown to mimic estrogen and other hormones in the body. There's some research that shows that constant exposure can increase insulin resistance. And phytates are chemicals that are added to plastic to make them more flexible. The increased exposure, again, has been shown to create associated with insulin resistance. Pesticides, usually in food or anything that the water that we consume, if it has been, the pesticides have been leaked into the water, increased exposure had been associated with an increased risk of diabetes, and then other normal developmental metabolism and unintended weight. Let's see, I think that's the same. So some ways to avoid them, right, is to purchase more organic options if possible, or like if you're able to grow some of your vegetables at home, right, then that's another option, like creating your own garden. Avoiding plastic food containers, or microwaving them, right? So microwave them maybe in a bowl, a ceramic or a glass bowl. And they're reducing the consumption of canned foods, unless if it says BPA free, right? That means that it's going to have less of those chemicals. And you're taking your shoes off at the door just because of how we walk everywhere, and we bring in those chemicals in our shoes. Let's see, and that's all I have.
Thank you. Thank you, Leonela.
Welcome.
And now whoever having the questions, you can put it in the chat, or only a few, then you can put it, you can talk. Anybody having questions? please, you can put it in the chat. Otherwise, thank you. Can you talk about the skim milk versus whole milk?
Yeah, awesome question. So the skim milk and versus the whole milk, the only difference is going to be the amount of fat, right? It's both milk are going to have your vitamin D, they're going to have the same amount of protein, about 7 to 8 grams. But yes, the only difference is the amount of fat that is going, and saturated fat that is going to be in the milk. Of course, because of that, that removal of fat, right, it's not going to be as rich. Sometimes people like that richness of the whole milk, but it is because of the removal of the fat, which is going to decrease your calories as well. But in terms of nutrition, it's pretty much the same. Great question.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any more questions? So, thank you, Leonila, and you explained us how our healthy eating plate. So it is better to have healthy eating plate contains almost half of the plate is vegetables and fruits, and a quarter of the plate whole grains, like that, and protein half plate. So it gives the whole healthy meat. That's what you recommended. Thank you. And also stay active. Exercise is very important. So you can manage it, whatever the blood sugars. So, and saturated fats, whatever the limited saturated fat, that helps, to, burn them and use them as a healthy diet. And one more thing, I was involved in so many nonprofit organizations, and especially after the COVID, we see that a lot of Indians affecting with the heart attacks. We see that nationwide in the USA, almost monthly 2 to 3 cases are happening with the heart attacks. So we don't know the correct reasons, but one of that one is our ethnic group is more targeted because of our genetical, like we have a smaller coronary artery, and also our lifestyle habits, like especially the food habits. So food habits, we use a lot of salt, a lot of spices, fried curries, or what we take, and the rice. And especially, even though we take all these, we are not keeping ourselves active. So that is mainly affecting our total body, and we are putting ourselves into risk, and also putting ourselves in our families into risk. So with this, Leonila's talk, I hope it helps us to maintain our healthy plate and get better, keep our health healthy. Thank you.
You're very welcome. And I will send you the slides so that way you have them. And I think someone asked about them, so I'll send them to you, and then you can give them to the community.
So,
but thank you. It was my pleasure.
Thank you all for participating. Yeah, thank you. Thank you all for participating, and have a wonderful rest of the day.
You too. Bye-bye. Thank you, everybody.
Suma, are you